get it, we understand.
Nobody thought to check that data internally. I cannot question.
Somebody needs to tell the truth in this House that the Prime Minister has lied.
This party certainly wouldn't be getting my vote for so many reasons.
Hello and welcome to The Table, a new discussion show from Byline TV where we'll be having productive debates about the things that really matter with people who we might not always agree with. My name's Jemma Forte. I've got a great panel today and you need to know that this isn't any ordinary talk show. At this table, there's no hiding behind sound bites or slogans because I think we've all had enough of those. We're going to get to the heart of the issues and explore the philosophical and cultural underpinnings behind our positions, and nothing is off the table. So, joining me today, we have Rebecca Reid, who's a journalist and columnist for the Telegraph Women's section. We've also got Dawn Butler, Labour MP for Brent Central, and Cristo Foufas, Talk TV presenter. So welcome all to the table, and I'll be steering you through all of this. So we are going to kick off with, of course, the Tory leadership contest, because it's what the whole country is embroiled in at the moment. So we will be covering who's in, who's out, and also are any of them really going to be any better than Boris Johnson, or are they all kind of marred by him? We're also going to be talking about private schools and asking, should they actually be abolished altogether? So first up, as Boris Johnson has resigned his leadership of the Conservative Party and a new leader is expected to be chosen by the 5th of September, who do we think should be the next Prime Minister? With former Chancellor Rishi Sunak now the favourite to win, could he be the man to fix Britain's troubles? What do we think? I'm going to start with you, Dawn.
Well, I mean, let's not forget they've been in government for 12 years. The country is like at its lowest ebb. They've had this supreme liar in charge, and he's now tainted the whole of the party. So no matter who becomes the next leader and then will subsequently become the next Prime Minister, I really honestly believe we should have a general election. I think it's only fair, because why is it that a small group of people, and remember, it will be a small group of people, if it's not just the MPs, it will be the Tory members, which, who knows what the figure is, what, 160,000 people? You know, we're a country of how many? And they're going to decide who our Prime Minister is? I don't think it's right.
Do you have a different take on that, Cristo? Do you feel like here's an opportunity for a rebrand for the Tory party?
Well, I mean, you know, there are quite strict rules about how the Labour Party leader is also elected. And so within the rules that we have, this is where we're at.
But this isn't just a leader of the party. This person goes on to be the Prime Minister of the country.
You must have been furious when Gordon Brown became Labour leader without a general election then.
But I wanted a general election then. We almost had
Well, also, he actually should have won one, because his career would have been so much
absolutely,
better.
he would have won. He would have won. I agree with that.
Huge mistake.
And the fact is, we did go for a general election not that long after.
Eventually.
Yeah, not that long after. But at the end of the day, this isn't the first time that the Tories are going to elect a leader that then doesn't go straight to a general election, and I think we should do it.
Well, in fairness, I'll never get over the time that they did it the worst way possible and got rid of my beloved Margaret Thatcher. Now, I'm thrilled to hear that Rishi Sunak, after having said that there would be no tax cuts, is now saying that he would emulate Margaret Thatcher in his economic policy. Not sure I believe it, and not sure I am convinced by Rishi as someone who is ideologically in favour of the Tory party. I'm certainly not in favour of many of the characters in it, and I was not a fan of Boris Johnson, didn't vote for him, I never would have. I now have some hope for the Tory party if they elect someone who is perhaps a more Thatcherite character. And when I say that, not necessarily Thatcherite policies, even though I would endorse those, but someone who cares about being right more than being liked. and I am sick to death of politics.
What does that actually mean, though, cares about being right? I mean, they think they're right even when they're wrong.
Yes, but I'm sorry, you cannot say that when you've had Boris Johnson, who U-turned so many times. I'm surprised he wasn't able to fall over because he was so dizzy.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But they think they're right.
He was right. Thatcher ploughed on, even though the country was telling her she was wrong, to preside over a revolution where she was proven to be correct. Small state, low tax. You are encouraged to do the best for yourself. It's not up to the state to tell you what you need to do.
Was it right to sell afford the council housing?
I wonder, Rebecca, where do you stand on this?
I mean, like lots of people, I don't like any of them, but I think there are like lesser and greater degrees of how much of a problem it's going to be. I'm sort of increasingly convinced, as surprised at myself I'm going to say it, that Kemi Badenoch might be the best choice, because I think that her views on free speech are actually really compelling. And despite the fact that I literally live in Islington, like, my daughter's middle name is Persephone. I am everything that you think when you talk about, like, a liberal metropolitan elite. I am quite concerned about the free speech situation at the moment and the way that things are being suppressed in universities, the way that academia is changing, the way that people are increasingly afraid to say things. And Kemi seems to be the only candidate who is really coming up against that. And I think that's a cross-party issue. In fact, there's been some cross-party work on it, hasn't there?
So I find it interesting that you've selected that as something different, and you were talking about the tax cuts, which to me seems to be the overriding message from all of the candidates is talking about tax cuts, which for me personally, I'm like, and how are you going to fund that when the economy is in such dire straits? And so for me, it seems tone deaf. Like, the NHS is really, really struggling.
People are struggling to survive.
Yeah,
people are struggling to eat.
Then give them more of their own money to take home.
But they're not, though, are they? They're giving the money to the corporations, not people.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think
I agree.
Threshold.
Give people more of their own money that they're earning. Give them pay rises so that they can spend them. They can spend money locally, and that would increase.
That would drive
increase
our further. Give them more.
But why give it to corporations? We've got the lowest corporation in the tax in the G7. Why give it to corporations?
That incentivises people to have jobs, and secondly,
it incentivises companies and organisations.
Raise the tax threshold so that more people have more of their own money to take home. They'll get it back in VAT anyway.
I don't think anybody disagrees that absolutely we would all like to pay less tax. I think the issue is when we hear people, and they all invoke the ghost of Margaret Thatcher. They all do it. It's like that newspaper who always gets Princess Diana's ghosts to say things like Meghan Markle. It's a sort of thing that the Tories do. But I think, isn't it true that Margaret Thatcher cut corporate tax from like 98% to 40%?
Yes.
Which is a very, very hefty cut.
And we ended up booming as a result of it.
But then, do you remember what happened afterwards? I wasn't born, but I think it was bad.
Well, yeah, but unfortunately, that is where we're at, is a boom and bust economy.
And to be fair, I think if somebody said to me...
boom or bust.
But to be fair, if somebody said to me, I guarantee you get 10 years, the whole of your 30s will be boom, and then you'll get some bust afterwards. Having lived my entire adult life in recession to recession, bust to bust, I might be tempted to take 10 years of boom for another bust. I can sort of see how people are going to be...
But the thing is, let's not forget Brexit, right? You know, they already predicted that it would take 10 or 15 years for our economy to recover.
But they never said that before the referendum.
They don't. It depends on who you were listening to.
Leave side. I mean, the Leave side. Now they're selling that as, we always said it was 10 or 15 years.
They didn't put it on a bus, though, did they? Like, really small at the bottom of the bus.
On that, we agree. I think Brexit is a spectacularly bad idea.
At the heart of this, we're looking at a candidate who's the bookies' favourite, who is extraordinarily wealthy within his own life. Now,
his wife is.
He is too.
But she's the real juice. He's normal Tory rich. She's unusual Tory rich.
Yeah, they're both billionaires.
And that's a gross generalisation. There are many people who are Tory because they aspire to do better, and that, dare I say, is the problem, I think, with Labour, and the problem with Labour's offering in the last election.
Sorry, I meant Tory MPs, not Tory voters. Lots of voters aren't.
To say that, and this is a real sort of misconception, which I agree we kind of need to sort of land and nail. Like, of course, Labour members are aspirational, and we want people to be aspirational. So that isn't a monopoly that the Tories own. And let's not forget, when they say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, a lot of them have inherited wealth. They didn't work hard to make. They didn't work hard to make their money. So we need to really crush that myth, because that really irritates me.
The reason I am, if we're going below the surface, the reason I am an ideological Conservative, a Thatcherite, why I'm happy that she is finally no longer this dirty word within society and being invoked.
You're just trying to create a narrative around.
No,
Thatcher,
I'm
but
not.
Anyway,
She is being spoken about by Rishi, and today she is being spoken about that Rishi will take Thatcherite economic policy. So I've not just invented this. This is now being said by the candidates, and the reason is because my family, my immigrant father, who came to the UK not really brilliant with reading and writing, under Labour was hammered with tax, was not doing well in the 1970s, and then under Thatcher's policies was able to start his own business, buy a house.
But the legacy...
Do I need to explain why the 70s Labour were terrible?
But the 70s Labour were not terrible.
The legacy of that is complicated, right? Like, I'm part of a family where there's a lot of ex-miners, and I go back to the Downs that used to have shoe shops and butchers and all of that, and they are boarded up, and basically nobody lives there. If there are parts of the country where, like, I personally benefited a lot from Thatcherism because my parents were yuppies. But other parts of my family, their lives were decimated by Thatcher's policies. So it's not like it universally went well.
I agree.
Like, it was
I actually agree with that.
Would you accept also that some things are quite cyclical? So, for instance, in the 70s, when there was the unions were incredibly strong and the climate was such, and Thatcher came in and sort of corrected some of that, which had a very Marmite effect on Britain, but arguably some of it was incredibly successful, some of it was absolutely horrendous for people. I think if you go to parts of Ireland, they're not massive fans, or part of Wales. Yeah. But have we not got overcorrected? And it's the last thing we need, because the balance has got to the point now we have 177 billionaires in this country, and actually normal people are being sort of very, very suppressed in terms of teachers and all these other so-called middle-class professions.
The people that we were clapping during Brexit, our key word.
Yeah, and maybe it's the opposite of what we need.
Privatising everything, selling everything.
Hang on, let him come back on that.
But this is Thatcher's legacy, which I just think you romanticise.
Well, look, firstly, I accept, as with any leader, and I do not judge her legacy based on the things she got wrong. The things she got wrong are as follows, I believe. Section 28, clearly
not great.
Not great.
Not
of
her
its
best
time,
moment.
not great. Too divisive in as much as I believe she had to break the unions, but I believe also what she didn't do was... because she knew those people would never vote for her, her biggest flaw was she didn't rule for the people who hated her as well as the people who, and a good leader should do that. So I don't believe that she was perfect. I see nothing wrong with billionaires. I would like, actually, to have had more of a Thatcherite ideology over the last few years of our government. We've the highest tax threshold
I've got no problem with billionaires
history.
as long as they pay their taxes and pay people well who work for them.
I don't disagree with that.
How do you get to be a billionaire? Is there an ethical billionaire on this planet? I don't think there
solve
is.
that by stopping billionaires, though.
No, but nobody
I don't think
need to
anyone should be
pay their right taxes. I mean, every single chancellor under Boris Johnson has got some issue, has been investigated, or a member of their family's been investigated for tax evasion, or avoidance. So, I mean, how is that a good thing?
Well, again, you won't get much of a defence of Boris Johnson's government from me, but ideologically,
but they're also standing to be leader.
We have the biggest, not all of them, we have the biggest state that we have had in history, the biggest tax take we have had in history. We have an ideologically, almost a Labour ideology within government. I am in favour of small state, the government facilitating you doing well for yourself. And that is why someone like Kemi Badenoch is the person I would be
But she's
behind.
a proper Tory.
Because she's a proper Tory.
Yeah,
she voted against the government on vaccine passports. She is that Thatcherite character, going back to the very start where you said, what does that mean?
I think
it means someone who is prepared to go against the grain because they believe they're right.
But in what way? Like, break it down. What is she going against exactly? Like,
well, she's been against the government in vaccine passports.
Sticking up 2 labels over toilets saying men and ladies. Pathetic.
Well, your leader can't define a lady with respect.
Absolutely pathetic. Tell me what it is that you're saying that she's going against, because I think we do need to break it down a bit. Because
I'm not sure. So I wouldn't personally have put those labels on myself, but I don't think it is pathetic. I think what she's saying is, I'm not afraid to have this conversation, and it maybe wasn't a very elegantly engineered solution, but I think a lot of people
agreed.
The Penny Mordaunt sort of flip-floppy trans men are men, but all they're not. But they are this kind of like I'm afraid to commit flipped it and the narrative thing is irritating.
Absolutely agree. It's almost that I almost care less about what she's saying and more that she's sticking to her guns.
But I think the issue is...
It's a very small section of society who cares about that at all. In the world that we face, the climate change and education and NHS and all these things that affect real people, who really cares about toilets?
But I think it's because it's a dog whistle. It's a way of
Exactly.
saying either I am pro or it's either I'm pro or anti-trans rights, or it's I'm afraid to have this conversation and not afraid to have this conversation.
It
Either
makes
way,
me
it does
shiver.
And it shouldn't be that.
No, it shouldn't.
It should be. It's a far more nuanced debate.
What is this Thatcherite? So I'm still not quite clear. So people who were listening that weren't born or whatever, or haven't studied. So what is this great Thatcherite kind of thing that you think is going to make our country better?
Again, my parents...
make people the majority of people more well off, not the top 1%. What is it?
Well, it's not about the top 1%.
I'm just asking what it is.
Thatcher, you will be well aware that Thatcher's big appeal was to the C2 voter. They're not the top 1%. They're the people who are the aspirational people who wanted to own their own home, who wanted to potentially start their own business.
Okay, so should we take the own your own home?
Right.
Yeah, so... Fair enough. People were given the opportunity to own their own home, and then
because of mortgage deregulation, because of loan deregulation,
and then you had the bust, right? You had the bust where people couldn't pay their mortgages. So you had a lot of people that actually went bust because they couldn't afford their mortgages.
Which is why it's brilliant that Gordon Brown took Bank of England out of government hands.
So, and then you had all the houses that were taken out of social housing and not replaced. So how's that good for the country?
You must be furious that Labour didn't build any houses as well then.
Well, they had to put right. They had to put right all of the damage that happened under a Tory government.
But why didn't they build more houses?
I think an interesting follow-on from that would just be to say, I think the perfect illustration of that is that I am currently buying an ex-council house. So I am a very well-paid middle-class woman married to a very well-paid middle-class person, and we are clawing together to be able to buy a 3-bedroom ex-council that would have been the bottom of the list, last thing anybody wanted when it was built, because it wasn't replaced by anything.
That's what I bought. My first home was
No, and I'm incredibly excited about it. I'm not complaining, but I'm saying it says something that I am incredibly privileged, and that is the absolute most I can aspire to. And anybody who is less privileged than me can't even aspire to that. That system is a little bit broken, right?
And I think we need to bring things back to the present. We've had a great chat about Thatcher, but we're going to get back to Rishi. And I'd like you to quickly have a look at this clip as well, and then tell me whether it's relevant at all or not. Have a look.
I have friends who are aristocrats, I have friends who are upper class, I have friends who are, working class, but I'm not working class. But I mix and match, and then I go to see kids from an inner city state school and tell them, to apply to Oxford and talk to them about people like me, and then I shock them at the end of chatting to them for half an hour and tell them I was at Winchester and, one of my best friends is from Eton or whatever, and then they're like, oh.
So, I don't know who leaked that clip, and what I will say is he was very, very young when he was saying the working class people.
Was he very, very young, or was he just young?
It was 2007, and he is 42 years old.
Okay.
So, how old was he? Someone bigger, somebody...
Okay,
he's 27, so he was 3 years younger than I am now. I'm not sure.
It wasn't very long.
But what I will
you did well to try and help him.
Well, I don't know.
He looks younger than that in that. I will give it. I thought he was 21, 22, and I was willing to cut him some slack for that.
So personally, I don't care how much money anybody has got, as long as they're paying all their taxes, which arguably is, and I know it's legal, maybe, but you've got a lot of candidates in here who've got so much money that their tax affairs are actually in the public interest. So that says something for a start. I think with politics, it comes back to empathy. That could be anybody. That could be someone that's gone to public school, someone who's gone to state school, but it's about understanding how other people feel and live. Can Rishi empathise with ordinary people, really?
Well, Rishi, I'm not hugely fond of because he enabled Boris repeatedly, and Boris was a dishonest, randy buffoon, firstly. I'm sorry, but that's actually true.
Absolutely.
But secondly, he's an idiot for having said that in the clip, and I think you've a fair point about not necessarily having wealth, but whether someone pays their taxes fairly. And by the way, tax, not evasion, avoidance, I actually don't have a go at people that avoid their taxes. A corporation avoiding its taxes is what it will do because it will always reduce. That's why people have accountants. Yeah. That's down to the government
Absolutely.
in question, whom I I think we might agree on this, Dawn, we might fall off our chairs, that should have legislation in place to make sure that those avoidance mechanisms aren't there. Don't blame the person, blame the government.
It should be legal or not legal, but it should be possible if you've got a really good accountant.
Exactly.
The most unfair thing is that the richer you are, it's like you get sent free stuff for being famous naturally, though they could
close those loopholes.
Close the loopholes, 100%.
For me, the most chilling point of this, well, there were two chilling moments, and it doesn't matter because he's not in the race anymore. It was Steve Baker being interviewed and saying, if I seize power, that worried me.
Don't like that.
And then the second bit that really worried me was Suella Braverman sort of striding down the road, talking about how, people on benefits. Yeah. It was like, whoa.
It was like 2005 all over again.
It was
a real
really frightening. The welfare state is there as a cradle. I think that you're 3 life events away from needing it yourself. All of us.
Also, does she have any idea how hot... Do you think that if I thought I could be at home claiming and having a nice life, I wouldn't be there right now? Like, why would... If it was easy, people would do it. It's hard. It's incredibly hard.
And actually, the reality is a lot of people who are claiming
are working.
Yeah. But it's also it's a rubbish amount of money that you have to jump through a lot of hoops for.
Well,
it's not an easy way out.
COVID proved that, right?
Well, actually, no, the furlough scheme was actually really easy.
No, but people were saying, how on earth can people survive who didn't have furlough? They were like, how on earth can people survive on this small amount?
If we talk about furlough, left-wing ideology, huge state. They're deciding that it will give money to people.
It was great,
and
free
now
money.
we have inflation going absolutely crazy. You say we have a right-wing government. We have a left-wing government. Boris Johnson is Corbyn in a fat suit.
I mean, I don't think that Boris Johnson is an actual Tory. It was very funny. I don't think Boris Johnson is a Tory in his boots. And I say that because he lived in Islington, has that kind of dinner party vibe. He really wanted to be in charge, and this was the party he could be in charge of. I don't think he actually cares about very much either way, honestly.
No.
I think that's key with the premise of your question in terms of, can they relate to sort of ordinary people? Do they care about ordinary people? And I think that is the crux of the issue. And this government isn't a government that cares about others. They care about a very small group of people. And I think we've seen that time and time again in terms of their policy, in terms of how they dealt with COVID. It's just quite...
Why are Labour doing so badly? Why aren't Labour cutting through?
They're not doing badly in the polls.
But they're not doing as well as they should do. 12 years.
But Keir isn't very effective.
You don't have the right to say that you are the caring party when, firstly, there's not much evidence of it, but secondly, you're not cutting through.
Well, there's lots of evidence in terms of us being the caring party, actually. And if you look at where our priorities would lie as opposed to where this government priorities lie, there's a stark difference. And why are we not doing as well as we should? Because there's so much... in terms of the establishment against Labour. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing better, because I think as a party we should, if I'm honest with you. I think we should be way more ahead. But if you think about the whole establishment, if you think about the legacy media, if you think about how they behave and act towards Labour as opposed to how they act towards a government that's been in government for 12 years, stark difference.
And also, you say Blair. Blair was on Murdoch's yacht. He played that game. He got their backing.
He understood aspiration.
He played the game.
Secondly, you have the BBC, left-leaning, Guardian, Mirror.
I think you're making that up.
Everyone thinks that the BBC is against them, which is a sign
which
the
is
BBC
a sign
is
that
somewhere
they're
in the middle. The true issue about the media is that the majority of young, bright people coming out of university, like all young people, are slightly left-leaning. Most people grow out of it and become more right-wing as they get older.
But anyway.
No, it was always this
I'm getting further left as I get older.
That's interesting. But the majority of the time,
young right.
people between the ages of about 16 and 25 are generally quite idealistic, which means that all of the junior people in most media institutions are fairly left-wing. So there is an issue that there is sometimes a little bit of an underlying bias in the grunt work that is done, the basic churning out articles. But how do you get around that? The fact that young people are generally fairly lefty?
Well, because when they actually realise reality of the world of paying a mortgage,
paying tax. Well, they can't have a mortgage
they realise that you either want to be a socialist when you grow up, but you realise you can't do both.
Why is socialist used as weaponised? If you look into what being a socialist means, it's absolute rubbish.
It's absolute bullshit. And that is something that's parroted by Tories time and time again, because They're actually scared. They were scared of people understanding, you know, their own power. That's why they're scared of the trade unions. Why are you so against trade unions when the whole premise of a trade union is to help people get better terms and conditions at work?
A trade union is fundamentally
because trade unions always mean strikes first.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, it does. Look at where we are at the
Can
moment.
I just interject? To me, being having a socialist tendencies, if you like, because I don't even like to put labels on myself. I'm not really affiliated to any. It's about my kids are going to have a certain start in life, but I would like other kids that aren't as privileged to also have a chance. That is it. And if that means distributing...
Why does that mean socialism?
Because it means...
fundamentally socialist.
That is socialism.
No, it's not. No, it is not.
It 100% is. It's just that in the right-wing media, they weaponise it.
Why is that not
because
socialism?
I don't believe every single bigger socialist-type left-wing government that we've had has always meant, other than the one we have at the moment, a higher tax burden.
Okay, but in
for
practice...
everyone. Why should more of your money be taken by the state? Why should I work harder for money to be given to other people?
So you think you work a load harder than a nurse?
That
is the point, though, isn't it?
So what? So I shouldn't be allowed to keep more of my own money. I shouldn't be allowed to.
But there is no correlation between how hard you work and how much you earn.
That is absolutely not. I'm not saying.
I work so much less hard than a nurse. I can't even tell you how much less hard than a teacher I work, and I make more than them.
Yeah,
how hard you work and how much you make are not correlated.
That's the whole.
Bring it down to whether I work harder than a nurse, rather than the principle
You just
of
said
people being able.
saying,
I didn't bring up nurses.
I'm not saying
people being able to keep hold of their own money.
All I'm trying to say is I think it's really unhelpful when we equate working hard and earning lots of money, because those two things are not in any way
I've not equated those.
Especially as a lot of people in the Tory party did not work hard to get to where they were. They got to where they were because of privilege, because of connection, because of old boys club.
That
is how they got
there.
There are degrees. This idea.
In Parliament.
Well, yeah, I think most MPs work very hard when they get there.
Many MPs.
I think...
Okay, not most.
I won't ask what category.
I mean, to be fair, you know better than I do.
And I also don't think MPs, given the job that they do, get like this amazing wage.
MPs should be paid more, unquestionably.
I agree.
But they shouldn't be able to have other jobs.
But everybody's so scared of, like, these people might have to give a little bit more when we've got more billionaires. I'm going to go back to it. The wealth gap, you've got people using food banks who are in full-term employment. Are you happy with that?
You are being so binary by suggesting that people should be able to keep more of their tax money. That firstly, I want to see nurses in poverty, and secondly, I want to see people in food banks.
What is the solution to getting nurses out of poverty then? Because that really troubles me.
A lower tax threshold so they keep more of their own money.
But they'd only get the kind of grand a year.
Secondly...
So why isn't that happening? You're saying... You're saying... I mean, the Tories have been in charge for 12 years.
I agree.
Right, so why didn't that happen?
Well, I agree. You know, I am no spokesperson for this particular Tory government, and I want to make that very clear, but I agree they should be keeping more of their own money. Secondly, if I were in charge, I would be having policies like more house building, which is absolutely necessary.
But then you tank the house prices and then nobody votes.
Well, I'm sorry, we need to have slightly lower house prices. As someone who owns a house, I agree with that.
I totally agree. But nobody will vote for you.
I would be moving anyone who works in the services like nurses, like police, like any of those, top of the list of social housing. Therefore, their contribution to society is subsidised somewhat by the housing that they have.
But then you have to...
you can't be against that, Dawn Butler.
Then you have to bump disabled people and people in abusive relationships
if you have
and
enough
people who are
housing,
homeless.
if you have enough housing,
But
there have been
then
failures.
you'll never get voted back in because you've tanked everyone's house prices.
You won't tank house prices by building enough social housing
for every single nurse.
For everyone who needs it.
That's quite a lot of houses.
Well, there is not enough houses.
I would like more houses.
There are
100%. But I think you'd find it's a problem.
This is all really spicy and wonderful, but I'm going to move you on to the next topic, which I'm sure we'll all be really calm about. So last week, Starmer said that private schools should have their charitable status abolished. Let's go further than that. Let's say, should we get rid of them altogether? Rebecca.
Well, you fundamentally can't, really, because people have a right to choose how they educate their children. So unless you outlaw homeschooling, you can't create a system where people can't educate their children outside of the state education. And I think it's really important that you have the right to do that, because I don't like intervention in people's lives generally. To be candid, went to boarding school, so I have a vested interest in the fact that it was an amazing education and an incredible experience, and if I could afford it, I would want to privately educate my children, which makes me an absolute cliche because I am very much ideologically think that they shouldn't exist, and I also probably would send my child to one, which is where the majority of
You and Diane Abbott would get on very well.
Well, no, and the thing is, it's so hard when you look at your own child. I didn't think I'd be this, but then suddenly it's your child, and you don't want the same thing as everybody else. You want your child to have the best things in the entire world.
So here's a question. If there was a fantastic, which there are many, outstanding state school at the end of the road, would you go private?
The problem is they can't compete on some stuff. So state schools still finish at 3:30 at the end of the day, generally speaking. So you can't be there. Like at my school, if I wanted to go and be in the art department till 9 o'clock at night painting, there would be somebody there. It would be a safe place to be, and I could hang out there all day. State schools just don't have, and there are the list of
Why
ways
has
is
private
different.
schools got charity status in the first place?
In theory, because they do a lot in their community. So the school I went to, they do a lot in so everybody in my
millions of pounds of tax breaks.
So
Eton. I mean, why?
But there,
why?
When we talk,
Eton
when
have
we
just had 3.3 million of rental income from its real estate portfolio, 5.8 million from selling some commercial property, and they are.
But they're a big land. But
they get more, and they get.
But they own that land. So here's my issue.
Use that to prop up the school.
When we talk about private schools, it's kind of difficult because you are conflating a £2,500 a term 500-child school in the middle of nowhere and Eton. And those are not really the same thing.
Eton is a private school on steroids, isn't it? It's an extreme.
And what will happen if you get rid of...
They've still got charity status,
But if you get rid of charity status across the board, then all that will happen is, I think they said about 200 very small private schools, the cheap ones, basically, will all close. And if you live in a rural area, your options for schooling very often are really bugger all, because there either isn't one locally, or if one that doesn't have dyspraxia or dyslexia provision, you are removing choice.
Well, then you improve the local schools.
But that doesn't seem to happen in reality.
That's because it hasn't happened.
So the state school funding has dropped and dropped and dropped in the last 10 years to a point where a child who goes to private school, and I'm not against private schools, but I do not think they should have charitable status, because the idea of using that money to put into education, which is just, not doing very well at the moment. So a child that goes to private school will have 91.5% more spent on them in one academic year. That works out at $6,500. Yeah. So, and the thing is with private school is it's not just about academic achievement. It's about that sort of, you go to a private school and you're told you can be this, you can be that. It's aspiration. It's like, it's unlikely
more that your friends' parents, and one of the things I think, so at my sister's school at the beginning of the year, all the parents had to fill out a form about what their career was, and then it all went into a hat. So when you go to your head of house and say, I think I might want to be an interior designer, they can look at it and go, okay, Tilly's mum's an interior designer, spend a week with her. And these kinds of systems, that's it. And there's no reason a state school couldn't do that, but they don't.
But then that means you're not. There's nothing to do with merit there, right? It's to do with connections.
It's both.
And links and connections rather than merit.
Well, both.
And
it doesn't mean you don't have merit.
7% of children go to private schools, but they get, as you were saying, 91%. So that money should be rediverted into state schools. And actually, I think the more people that you get, the more parents that you get in state schools that are middle class or whatever, the better the school will be, because you'll be investing, you'll be fundraising, you'll be insisting that there are more teachers, assistants, so that you could stay in art class until 9
This is exactly what happens. So mysteriously enough, the primary school locally to me is the one that Boris Johnson's children went to when they were little, and magically it went from. I'm sorry. The older ones we know about.
Huge, the whole class.
The top layer of the children, and. As far as I understand it, that child went from special measures to outstanding within a couple of years, funnily enough, because it had some cachet, lots of people's children wanted to go there. Problem with that was, then, all of the kids from the local estate stopped being able to go there, because the pushy middle-class parents all want to go, they start taking up all the places, they are often more prompt with their paperwork, etc.
It's not an argument to scrap charitable status.
The best argument to keep charitable status is that would mean that schools stop doing anything in their community. Where I live, pretty much everyone learns to swim in a private school pool, because it's used for every single primary school for free.
They'll find another way to get people to swim in the pool.
But when you list everything...
You're so dismissive when it comes to that. You complain ideologically, again, about the lack of public services, but when it comes to getting rid of a private school, it's fine. They'll find a local pool. Yes, but they'll find a local... Will they?
charitable
Will they?
status.
Will they find somewhere
If
locally
they've
to
got
do
a
it?
pool, if the pool's not going to disappear, if they've got a pool, the pool won't
So what's
disappear. They'll find a way to keep the pool
So
open so people can use
a state grab of those assets.
We're talking about charitable status. Why should private schools have charitable status? Why?
Because those parents, firstly, are paying to have those children there. I would go further.
They can pay.
I would give,
Why
those,
have charitable
I would give
status?
those parents a tax break.
They can-
because if
they
didn't have
can
charity
pay.
school
Why have charitable status?
Because it would mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that those parents would have to pay then VAT on the fees that they're giving.
Well, they want to
That's
pay for their
20%
kids to go
extra.
to a private school.
Well,
They have to
you
pay.
say
Then
private
most people couldn't
schools.
They have to pay.
You made a very good point.
Why should they get
If
money
you let me
back
finish,
for
I'll
it?
tell you. You made a very good point in as much as that private schools are not just private schools, these Etons, they are very small independent schools. And actually, the head of the Independent School Council said that if you were to get rid of the charitable status, if you were to bring in VAT for those parents who would have to pay, well, then what you're actually going to end up with is fewer children going to those private schools. You're going to put a massive burden of over £400 million on the state school system by those children
But they
moving
would have
to
saved
state
some money,
schools.
right, from the
But
charitable
not
status.
400 million.
Well,
They won't save
If
far.
that
You're right.
money,
It won't
if
be
that
400
money
million.
gets invested into state schools, then the children that might acquire a better education
Where's
might
that money
in the
gonna come from?
in the future actually pay higher taxes themselves.
Where's that money going to come
But
from?
you'll still have the kids of oligarchs going to these top schools. All it means the kids of accountants can't go to states to
But
private
there are a
schools.
couple of extra points here. Those parents are already paying taxes, by the way, because they're paying taxes on the
Why?
income.
You still haven't answered
that
the
they are-
question. Why is charitable status?
Because it's an education.
Because technically they are charities.
Because
They run
they're
as
charities.
they're
They're
not for profit.
education.
But
for
how are they
children.
run by how are they a charity?
Yes.
They are a
They're
school
businesses.
that get money from people that are more wealthy to run an education system. There is a state education system they can use. So if they want to pay, then fine. If they have to pay extra, then let them pay extra. Why have charitable status?
Because
It makes it. How old is this? How old is this? This is like how many? 200
I
years
believe
old or
those parents
something
should
like
actually
that?
get a tax break.
So-
I believe that they shouldn't pay tax on the money that they're putting towards those schools. I believe...
The question is, should they have charitable status? That's the
Yes,
question.
absolutely.
Well, you haven't proven...
No, because I'm sorry, because they are providing education to children, therefore meaning that that is something that could be...
State schools are providing
If you-
education to more
And if
children.
you
So
are
don't they get
choosing
more money?
to spend the money you have been taxed on sending your children to a private school, that school should get some of those benefits in order to improve those children's education. Why not?
Because you are still making your tax contribution to the state sector.
You've paid
whether
taxes
or
on the
not
money that's gone in there.
And then your children... A bit like... I find it really weird that people don't get that this about private healthcare.
This is fine.
But it's the same thing.
But this is fine. You want to pay to send your child to private school, fine. Why do they need to have charitable status? Take away the charitable
Because
status.
if you take
Whatever
away
extra money it's going to cost, you're going to have
You'd
to
make it
burden
more
them.
expensive.
You're going to have to, yes, it will be more
So
expensive.
therefore
But it
fewer people would be able to go
But
there.
it comes
Oh dear, what a
dramatically...
Well,
But
why-
that is a shame, because if you live in an
It's a
area...
It's not a shame because only 7% of children go to private school.
Taking a massive
It's not a
burden,
shame.
taking a
Do you know what I
£400
mean?
million
It's not a
burden
shame.
off the education system.
It's not taking burden
Why do you
out
want
of
less
the
money
It's not
of the
taking a
state
burden
education
out of the
system?
education
Okay.
system. It's just not. It's taking
you
money
think-
away.
You're arguing for less money in the state education
Oh my
system.
goodness.
That's what you're arguing
I
for.
tell you what, let's give it a try and see what happens.
I know that Eton is an
A 400
extreme
million
case,
try.
It's
but
an
we
elite
have
few, 7%. It's a very elite few.
We've had a couple of prime ministers now, at least,
Nearly one in
who
10.
were Eton educated. You know, is that in itself perhaps a bit of a problem, given that that's the extreme
Yes,
end? Because I tell you one
fundamentally,
thing I
yes.
found interesting is I heard this fascinating interview by someone who had attended Eton. He didn't speak highly of Johnson. He'd been sort of bullied by him. But and sort of ribbed a lot, ribbed. They say that, don't they? Ribbed you. And
Boris Johnson
but he was
was awful
saying
at
that to be head boy, you lobbied. You got taught how to lobby.
That's
like you
fantastic.
do.
More schools should do that.
No, well, but they
That's
don't.
fantastic.
Right? So what they're doing is this. It isn't though. Lobbying is like a form of. So it was like you vote for me, you can go to my mum's house in Musty.
Yeah, but that's
you
a
vote
life-
for me,
that's a life skill.
But that's a rather grubby style of politics.
But it's a very useful life skill. And OK, in a normal school, in my school, it would have been House of Mustique. It would have been like, I've got 4 more lights left. But it's still learning how to
But
barter with
you're
people.
learning
It's
how
good.
to get your own way using rather manipulative tactics,
Which is
rather
useful.
than just bringing people on side through good leadership, through honesty, through
I don't think
integrity.
teenagers really... I don't don't think, as a teenager, really, what are you going to do to demonstrate good leadership and honesty and integrity?
What, you think you can't teach that? I personally do. Of course you can. You
I
can
think
do
being
all sorts of
wily is
things.
probably more useful.
Exactly,
I really do.
resourcefulness,
Well, it looks very
resilient.
So why should we pay for that with a charity tax?
You're not paying for it, you're just giving them
But
a
we
tax
are.
break.
Why? Why?
Because
that could
it's
bring a
about
lot more money back in
educating
the system.
children and you're removing a burden
7%.
from the state
But
school
7% is nearly
system.
1 in
So-
10
Put them back in the state school system. You'll make the state schools a lot better. Let's have smaller classroom sizes. Let's have more
How?
teachers.
How?
Let's pay teachers more money.
And where
Let's
will
get
the money
some,
come
let's
from
get some money
to
back
do that?
into the
Again,
state
I would
school.
give those
Would
parents
you-
a tax break. Their
Well, you've
parents are
got all these
also paying
accountants.
into
Would
the
Start raising
national
money.
education system.
would this apply to everything? Would you get rid of schools for private schools for special needs children? Would you get rid of state boarding schools? Will you pay
Private
to go there?
healthcare.
Will you pay less? Like, where does that
Charitable
stop?
status.
For state boarding schools would be gone.
This
Or
is
for
about
schools for disabled children.
This is about charitable status.
Okay, but private
This is-
schools for
this
disabled
is-
children, would
right.
they lose their charitable status?
I think to make it fair across the board, everybody will lose their charitable
So
status.
even disabled
And then
children
you'll-
would have to
and
go
then-
to a state
And then you'll
disabled
find then you'll find a way. Because listen,
What would the way be?
under Labour, we ensured, for instance, that there was more money put into schools for children with special educational
But they were
needs.
still pretty
Hang on,
shit.
there was more. No. Some of the schools,
What
some of my
of them were?
Some of my schools in Brent did an amazing job to make sure that we had more teaching assistants, to make sure that we had more people and more money. So that was how the money was diverted. When the Tories came in, they scrapped all of that extra money. My schools had lost like £1 million. Do you know what I mean? All that extra money was scrapped. That is how you improve local schools and education. Some people want their child, Take Marsha Devova, MP, okay? She's legally blind. She wanted to go to her local school. She didn't want to go to a special school. And what they needed was money to help make that happen.
100%.
So let's invest in the majority, not the top,
Your
not
issue is you think
7%.
it's
not
elite.
just the top.
You think it's all elite, when in actual fact there are lots of middle-class aspirational parents who scrimp and save
There's a
to
lot
send
of
their children.
aspirational parents in my constituency in Brent, and let me tell
I'm
you,
sure there are.
Let me tell you a little story. We have this Eton project where every summer schools from my constituency in Brent would go to Eton and they'd spend, I can't remember if it's a week or a month there, and the teachers who teach at Eton, the same teachers that would teach my kids in Brent, and I had those teachers coming to me with tears in their eyes saying, oh my God, we didn't realise that there were so many talented kids out there. And they said that a lot of the children that they teach don't even care about their education because they don't need it.
But if you scrap charitable status, those programmes
But they don't need the
So
education.
you've just sold the charitable status brilliantly.
They don't need the education. So that says to me,
great Eton
that
exists.
says to me that you invest in children, they can go on to be as aspirational as anything.
It's brilliant. They get the chance to go to Eton and do that.
But they would.
But Eton shouldn't. The whole point
but that's
is
a charitable
Eton shouldn't exist.
programme.
It's not- Eton shouldn't exist.
I
That's the
think
whole
it's-
point. Even the teachers were saying that. You know what I mean? The kids
I
that come
don't
to Eton,
think
the kids
the
that come to
teachers at Eton
Eton
think that Eton shouldn't
weren't interested in education. Not like my kids.
Okay.
Oh,
I
and
tell
by the
you
way,
what.
can I just say as my
on then.
caveat, state school educated here. I'm not saying this based on having gone
Will
to a
you be
private
privately
school.
educating the dogs, though?
Will I be privately educating my dogs? My dogs, well, they would turn their nose up at any school whatsoever, so I'm not sure.
Le Rose
that they
in
would.
Switzerland for them.
Yeah, maybe.
People don't want charity, they want a good education. So we don't need Eton doing a week or a month. Because first of all, I was against it. We don't want charity, we want good education. I want my local schools to be good schools, outstanding schools. I want investment in those schools. And if it means we take away the charitable status and they don't get a week at Eton or a month at Eton, so be
Well, I
it.
think you don't get one. You don't need to take away one to get the other. You can still aspire for good schools without taking away charitable status.
They get free money.
All right.
I think we're going to leave it there. I'm not sure we're all ever going to agree on that one, which is why it was so interesting. So thank you very much indeed. So, my goodness me. Right, thanks, of course, to all of my guests. Thank you to Rebecca Reid, to Dawn Butler, and, of course, to Cristo Foufas as well. Wow. So we will see you next week here on The Table. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I really hope you found the conversations stimulating, interesting and thought-provoking. But do tell us what you think. Let us know in the comments or send us a tweet at byline.tv. And now you can get involved too. So if you become a supporter or a member of Byline TV, then you can get even more involved. You'll be able to vote on the topics that we discuss here on the table, and you'll have access to loads of extra perks as well, like members-only Q&As, extended content, and the chance to decide the direction of Byline TV. Just go to byline.tv/join to become a member today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week at The Table.